Hello, I'm Thomas Cox, your MC for IMCnow's Components and Platforms for Consultants. That is the name of today's talk. So what are components and platforms for consultants? Well, a component is, for today's purposes, a small, reusable, well-defined chunk of functionality that a consultant can deploy together with professional judgment to achieve a more reliable outcome for a client. So a component could be something like a disk profile, cache projection spreadsheet, the positive intelligence system, various homegrown tools. Many of us have these. We may not call them components, but that's what we've got. In fact, Jerry Vieira, who I believe is here today, has an enormous library of these things. And so we're going to have an example of a component presented today. And a platform, for our purposes, the word has many meanings, but by what we mean today, a platform for a consultant is a software-based organizer or analytic framework that amplifies the consultant's labor, which, together with professional judgment, helps achieve a faster, more powerful, more reliable outcome for a client. So you see that they're doing similar things, but one's maybe a larger than the other, and offers a different level of value. Components being smaller, platforms being larger. So an example of a platform might be, say, QuickBooks or Corelytics or a New Orchard or Live Plan, to name just a few of a great many. And New Orchard is the one we're going to look at today. And these are best explained via Wardley mapping. This is why I think components and platforms are important enough that we should spend an hour today looking at them. Wordly mapping is a way of looking at a strategic situation and look at the useful elements inside of it and how they interrelate. And in particular, how these components or capabilities or pools of capital fit together and support each other, and how they change over time. So let's have a quick look at, this is not a full Wordley map. This is just one of the dimensions of a Wordley map. You'll see vertically that there's a customer here at the top. That's our true north. And then as you get further away from the customer and things are less and less visible to the customers, this is a description of a service called Photango, which was an online image manipulation service. They had the online image manipulation was a unit of functionality. The online photo storage was a separate unit. There was a print function. There was the website that kind of unified it all. And then behind the website, there was a CRM and the computing infrastructure at a data center and some electrical power. And so you can see it's not every possible thing under the sun, but it's maybe the things that they felt were important for some conversation that they wanted to have. And it's just the vertical dimension. Now let's make this from just a list of objects into an actual map by giving it both a true north, and let's make both dimensions be meaningful. So we've already got this sort of the visibility up and down. We just added this thing called evolution, moving from left to right, where things start off as Genesis, brand new in the world. Then there's things that are custom built. As things get more mature and more evolved, they turn into products or maybe rentals. And then eventually things turn into commodities. And that's a pretty natural progression for any object, component, product, or service. So let's have a look further at this. And the left, the middle, and the right are qualitatively different from each other, because in the world of Genesis, things are very poorly understood. This is where competitive advantage arises initially. And it's stuff that's constantly changing and has an undefined market. We don't know who even wants the first computer when we're building it in 1943. And then at some point you start getting into products like the custom-built LEO in 1951 or the product, the IBM 650 in 1953. This is where you have high profitability, high total value, lots of variation, and we're busy listening to our customers so they can tell us what they want. And then we get more and more of a productized and componentized thing until we get all the way over here into commodity, where Amazon Elastic Compute is launched in 2006. And here you get all the way to the right, and now it's actually very thin margins, very well defined, very standardized, very well understood and commonplace. And again, that's the evolution, and they're qualitatively different. Okay, let's look further. The a product that's down here is becoming more and more of a utility, more and more of a commodity. It's getting more efficient, in other words. And then it can be used to support some new thing or a bunch of new things that have just appeared in the world and are being custom made. And they're going to evolve as well. And they'll also move from left to right. And so the lower order objects support the creation of higher order objects. And in particular, as they move to the right and become highly stable, standard, obvious, low margin, their very standardization and lack of expense makes it feasible to start building these higher order objects, and thus products evolve. Why is that interesting? Well, what this means is on the left, you'll have, this is R&D departments. On the right is the red ocean of high competition, high volume, low margin. And then in the sort of leftish middle, custom built, is where consultants work. And we do our work in this, we're custom building interventions for people, often using things from other parts of the map. And so the first of our talks is about a component called positive intelligence. And my way of thinking about it in the worldly mapping sense is that there's this pipeline of maturity from early psychotherapy as a method of emotional mastery, passing then more recently through these 4 disciplines, positive psychology, neuroscience, and so on, all of which were boiled down into a kind of a beautiful reduction sauce called positive intelligence, which I believe satisfies many of the attributes of a commodity in terms of being very reliable, very well understood, and having a very predictable effect. And Bobbi Kahler is going to talk about that.
Thanks for that setup, Thomas. I'm so excited to be here. And I chose this quote here. It's by Dean Morton, the former COO of HP, because I think this kind of captures part of the value of PQ, positive intelligence. And he said that most change initiatives fizzle because of our mental saboteurs. And PQ gives us the tools to conquer them and create positive change that lasts. Now, positive intelligence, or PQ just really stands for positive intelligence quotient. Whatever you call that, PQ or positive intelligence, that's what builds up our mental fitness. And that's not mental health, but mental fitness. And that, of course, kind of begs the question, what's mental fitness? So the definition of mental fitness is that it is our capacity to respond to life's challenges and opportunities with a positive mindset rather than a negative, neutral, or stressed mindset. What's really important about that is when we're responding with a positive mindset, it's not about being, Pollyanna or just, unrealistically optimistic. It's about how do we access our brain's best resources. And that's where what the neuroscience, where that comes in terms of what they have found. So some of the results, some of the impact here that researchers have discovered is when we score high in PQ, and there's a scale between 1 and 100, and later I'll share a link where you can actually take an assessment to figure out what your score is. Anything over 75 is really the tipping point. So when we score high in PQ, we're setting ourselves up for peak performance. So the one that really stood out to me is the first one, outselling our peers in a control group by 40%. You can also see how it affects things like teamwork and collaboration, conflict management. It also helps us use our mental and emotional energy more effectively. It helps us recover faster from stress, rejection, and challenge. Leads to greater levels of productivity. And then also, and I think these are important, leads to greater levels of happiness and well-being and healthier relationships. So a great list of outcomes. When I think about mental fitness, I kind of think about it like physical fitness. I'm a road cyclist, and I think about it this way. I would not expect myself to go out and cycle a mountain pass in the Rockies if I didn't put time in at the gym, right? I have to build up my physical fitness. Our mental fitness is the exact same thing, and we're not taught about it. We're not taught how to do it. So what this program does is it provides basically a mental fitness gym, and it gives us a way to build our mental muscles very systematically and very quickly. And it's very easy to integrate into our days. Now, the great news is that whatever our PQ score might be, science has shown us how to build those muscles. And from my own personal experience, one of our clients, when he entered our 6-week program, his PQ score, I think it was at 27. And by week 6, he was around a 72. So really close to that 75 tipping point. So it's super exciting. And that's just not, our clients, it's across the board. So let's just take a quick look at the science here. So the program is based on the work of Shirzad Chamine out of Stanford. And he and his research team synthesized the research from the 4 main disciplines: neuroscience, cognitive behavioral psychology, performance science, and positive psychology. And positive psychology caught my attention because that's the study of human flourishing. It's what I love. It's what my grad program was about. And so I was kind of like really intrigued by that. The research involved hundreds of CEOs and their executive teams to study how are they working together, what's getting in the way, what helps them flourish. They also studied world-class athletes to see what was unlocking performance, and more than 500,000 participants from around the world. What he and his research team have done is to really radically simplify how to build mental fitness. So instead of us having to be an expert in all 4 of these areas, which is tough to do, time consuming, and then it's okay, now what do I do with this? They've distilled it down to make it easy and simple for people to use. So here's what they've learned. They learned that there are really only 3 core mental muscles at the root of mental fitness: the Saboteur interceptor, the Sage, and the self-command muscle. And I know those don't mean anything right now, and in 10 minutes we're not going to dive into those, but it's more to see like that high level view. What's really important to know about all of this is that we all have saboteurs, and so do our clients, and they're working against us. So that begs the question, what's a saboteur? A saboteur is our automatic way of thinking, feeling, and acting. And we often aren't even aware of it, right? And saboteurs have very strong and well-worn neural pathways. That's why it's so easy for them to hijack us. And that's what makes them automatic. So the program, Mental Fitness, is all about building new neural pathways so that we are able to build new and healthier habits. And then over time, those become automatic. So now the researchers have identified 10 saboteur personas. So let's just kind of quickly meet them. First of all, we have the judge. The judge is universal. We all have one. The judge comes in 3 forms: judging of ourselves, which most of us are kind of familiar with, judging of others, and judging of circumstances. And the judge creates a ton of stress for us. And most of our clients, and myself included, I hate to admit this, I thought my judge was a lot quieter than he turned out to be. So usually we find our judges more active than we think. So then we have the accomplice saboteurs. And as I go through these, just kind of think, okay, which ones of these might I have? Because most people have 2 to 3 predominant ones. Some people have more than that. And also, which ones might your clients have? Okay, so we have the avoider, we've got the controller, we have the hyperachiever and the hyper-rational, we have the hyper-vigilant, we've got the pleaser, the restless, the stickler, and the victim. And they're kind of self-explanatory. Now, I'm not trying to brag here, but if vigilance were an Olympic event, I'd have the gold medal. I mean, it's like I'm Usain Bolt and everybody else is running the race for second. That's how good I've always been at worrying. And I've known this since the 90s. I've worked on vigilance since the 90s. And I really just thought it was just going to become a part of who I was for the rest of my life. I'd wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning worrying about stuff. I couldn't turn it off. It was just like an endless radio station. After my first 3 weeks in the program, I started sleeping through the night. And if I did happen to wake up and thoughts would start, worry would start to come to me, I could quickly turn it off and go right back to sleep. And that's when I thought there's something really powerful to this program, because that's remarkable. I'd been working on it for 20 some years. And then in 3 weeks to have that kind of result. So what I'd like to do here is for you to think about for a minute some of your clients. Think about how the saboteurs could interfere with your work with a client. So let's just say that you have a client who has a high controller saboteur. This is a person who doesn't like to let go of control of anything. They want to own everything. How much resistance could that lead you to face? How does that slow down your work? How does it potentially affect the results that you get with them? And it's not just the controller, right? We could pick the pleaser, right? The pleaser is the person who hates to disappoint others. They don't want to, sometimes they don't like to take a strong stand about something. They don't like delivering bad news. Or a stickler, which is the perfectionist. And that they're going overboard, obsessing about the tiniest of details that really might not matter that much. But think about how that comes up with your clients. So what's really important to know here is that you can see results in days and weeks. It's a 6-week program. It's remarkably simple. It's effective. It's fast. It takes less than 15 minutes a day. It's app-based, and it can be guided as well because we have things called pods, and sometimes we add in coaching. But there's a lot of ways that you can use it. One of our clients, his name's Joe. He was the one I mentioned earlier that scored so low in the beginning. He told me, he said within the first 2 to 3 days, he started to notice that he was recovering from stress faster. He wasn't as negative. He didn't feel like the sky was falling on him. His main saboteur was a victim. And the exciting thing was within 2 to 3 weeks, his team started coming to him to say, Joe, what's going on? And even more exciting than that, on a personal note, he has 2 young kids, and they came to him and they said, Dad, what's up? We love being around you again. So I love the results we get with this. Anyway, that is just about my time, but I'll drop these into the chat as well. Thomas asked me to. The saboteur assessment, you can take it and you can find out which of the saboteurs might be most active for you. And also, what are the stories that they might be telling you? In other words, how could they be affecting you? Then the PQ score assessment, that's just the one that gives you an actual PQ score. And I'll also drop a link in there how you can contact me, because if you want to talk about any of this more, happy to do it. So with that, Thomas, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
We'll come back from Bobbi and I'll introduce the second speaker. A platform called New Orchard, right? The prior talk was a commodity. This is a platform. It's made up of things like big data, the capability maturity model for process maturity, and the ocean model of personality are 2 of the major things that, combined with big data, allow this New Orchard platform to exist. And so let's go to Rusty and James.
So we're really excited actually to chat with you all today. It was interesting, Bobbi, to hear your presentation, because the approach and the perspectives that we've really taken with data, organizational design, and approach to strategies really align with that aspect, and really focusing on the sort of the people culture side. I think historically so much work has been done to treat these as distinct, different, unrelated initiatives. And I think as we are progressing and the world's getting more complex, there's a realization that you really can't do one without the other, certainly not as effectively. Before we jump in, that it was worthwhile, just if I can get this to, there we go, to give a quick intro. We're a change analytics company, and we partner with clients to define, implement, and maintain sustainable change initiatives across businesses nationwide. We'll kind of get into what that really means and why we have taken this approach and the types of value that the tool provides. But before we get in, love for Rusty, if you want to provide a little background about yourself, and then I'll provide some of mine as well.
Yeah, so shared a little bit of this with my breakout room, but we started New Orchard back in January of 2020. It's a perfect time to start up a business. And but the platform that we've developed was out of my business partner and I's experience in the IT industry and assessing data and technological risk. And so we just found a correlation between the way that we were doing surfacing that risk of an organization based off of a standard and principles of that area of business. We started to kind of back up and look at business as a whole and ask ourselves the question, are there principles of business? And if so, can we surface where an organization is regarding its operational maturity, mindset, tendencies, beliefs, processes, procedures in an accelerated manner. And so that was the birth of what we call the Journey Strategic Platform, which James will talk a little bit about. But little on me, I'm in Nashville, Tennessee with James. Moved here from Washington, D.C. and have kids who've caused me to lose my hair. And yeah, we're excited to, like James said, we're excited to be here and be a part of this conversation. I do, like Bobbi, James already said it, but I'm going to emphasize it again. The way that you're looking at an individual is how we look at an organization as a whole, which is just, it's just really neat to kind of see the similarities there. So, James?
Yeah, thanks. My background, I've spent 30 plus years in operations, data, and technology type roles, really bouncing between each of those. I've primarily focused my time and attention in operations, but have found ways to leverage data tech in the execution of those. There have been a couple of times where I've stepped into purely tech roles in a CIO capacity or in an analytics capacity in earlier days of my career, but my true passion is really where those two areas bridge. Joined New Orchard earlier this year based on my appreciation for what they were doing within the organization and living in that world, that confluence between the two spaces. I want to talk a little bit about what we are trying to do in the problem we're trying to solve. So everyone's heard that the quote from Peter Drucker, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." In this context, he was not saying that strategy is unimportant, but strategy is very difficult to achieve and execute without considering the people aspect, the culture aspect of that side. The New Orchard's really taken that to heart and looked for better ways to understand the implications of people and strategy within an organization beyond just the culture surveys that really get out there. We dig in. And I told the group that I was in the breakout group, I could probably talk about this for days. We have 20 minutes, so you'll see us kind of breezing through some areas you may be interested in. Happy to chat offline about it if you have an interest. Here's the perspective. Some of you may have seen the data continuum that goes from descriptive analytics to prescriptive analytics. The part that's really missing in the technologist view of this continuum is the people side. You really can't understand. You can do some descriptive analytics. Hey, this is what's happened in the past. Here are the trends, the revenue. But diagnosing what's happened and what's caused that is heavily influenced by the people in the organization. If you want to predict what is going to happen, there's also a deep people aspect of it. And the prescriptive side, how do we influence the business in order to sort of shape the future? What can we prescribe doing is almost entirely people behavioral, and there's some contextual elements around macroeconomic factors and other business factors, but it's largely driven by the people side. Because of that, it is incredibly important to understand those foundations and how that really impacts the business. So we looked at a suite of products, the things that we've built out to help consultants and organizations really understand that comes in really 3 different areas. And before I sort of step into those 3 areas and then sort of the consolidated business 360, I want to talk about the general approach. I mentioned this in the breakout session as well. You see a lot of larger consulting firms and a lot of organizations that believe they're very established, come with a very solution forward framework, meaning we have this general or generic solution that we like to use, whether it's a specific methodology to solve certain problems, highly defined processes, and then those, or if it's an individual who has a highly specialized skill set, somebody with a PhD in, business analytics with a subspecialty in machine learning or AI, that's a solution looking for a problem within an organization. We took that and tried to flip it and start with a problem first approach. Let's better understand the problem we're trying to solve from a operations perspective, from a humanistic perspective. Once we understand that, we can implement or recommend much more focused solutions. It saves time, it saves cost, frustrations, and also increases the likelihood that it's going to expand or execute successfully. We have the two foundational items. We call this operational maturity. This one is change capacity, but this is also contextually can be understood as behavioral maturity. So operational maturity and behavioral maturity are the foundational elements. Business identity, this is really the North Star. Is everyone rowing in the same direction? And we use an assessment to identify that area, where the disconnect is, and then what the roadmap is to get alignment in perspective, strategic perspective among the leadership team. So BI, finding the North Star, change capacity, or operational maturity, behavior maturity, we could see that as the elements that are required to accelerate, or in a negative context, add friction to the flywheel. Operational maturity, building sort of a business operational foundation. And then the business 360 we pull together is really the intersection of each of these three areas to help interpret sort of the nuanced elements. How does the identity impact maturity? How does the change capacity affect our ability to even go in a specific direction, and our ability to execute the operational maturity side? Again, we don't have time to dig into each of these and how they interrelate, but we do want to give you a bit of exposure to these. The business identity, this is a typology assessment. We actually built this on a foundation of complexity theory, where there's a spectrum that goes from exploration to optimization. And in the complexity theory terminology, it's really exploration versus exploitation. Are you exploiting the resources you have, or are you exploring for new opportunities? Exploitation just sounds bad in a business context, so I like to use the term optimization. They're very similar in context, particularly in a business sense. We take those two extremes, explore versus optimize, and look at them from the lens of strategy, implementation, money, and people. These are various facets for 4 different areas of business focus. And the exploration versus optimization side, from a strategic perspective, we see disrupt or compete, innovate versus prove versus on the implementation side. From a money resource perspective, are you investing? Are you reserving? And on people, are you reflecting or are you curating? Meaning, is culture more important, or is the skill set more important in this context? What that leaves you with is a typology that's, I call this my Sweet 16 map, that really breaks down the behavior types, similar to a Myers-Briggs, the INTP or the ENFP. So we have these business areas, and you'll see a sample of a client that took this assessment and where each of their individuals really laid out. So you have an anarchist CEO. This is the individual who is 100% exploration. He does not see any need to optimize, wants to look for new opportunities, wants to change everything.
Hey, James, can I add one thing as you're saying this? Because I think that this is important, especially as you guys are seeing this. That's not the identity of the CEO. It is the way that the CEO perceives the business to make these decisions around strategy, implementation, money, people. So as James, we do this a lot. We talk about the CEO as the anarchist. It is not the CEO as the anarchist, but as believing that their business is the anarchist.
Yep, great point. Yep. We should have provided, or I should provide a little bit more background into that side. So each of the assessments, where you see something like a DISC, Myers-Briggs, or predictive index, assessments such as that, they're looking from a very individualistic perspective. How does that individual function? What is that individual's behaviors? How are they driving decisions? We took a very different approach in this sense, specifically with the identity and the change capacity side. And we did it for a number of reasons. So the perspective is, how do you perceive the environment in which you operate? We found that this approach has a tendency to dramatically lower the temperature of the respondees. So you tend to, if you ask somebody a question, hey, how do you think your CEO is competent in doing his job? That's a very personal, individualized question. Do you believe that there is hostility towards you based on your race, ethnicity? you'll get very polarized perspectives, very positive, very negative, and you miss a lot of the really complex nuance in the middle. So we wanted to eliminate that sensitivity, drop the temperature, and we do that by asking indirect questions about the environment and how they perceive it, whether it's how they perceive the team's decision-making or how they perceive the direction in which decisions are made within the organization. And you'll see it's hard to show you immediately on this slide, but you'll see in this context, there are 3 very distinct businesses that are being run within the organization. You have an outlier on the marketing side, but there's a contingent that believes they're very skeptical. They're reserving, meaning they're not interested in really investing a lot and taking a bunch of risks. So you see an organization, the CFO, the client experience manager, director of sales, really in this reserving element. You see another large contingent of the business who want to invest and they're more champions. So they're in the bottom right-hand side, not completely dissimilar, but very dissimilar from this side, a little bit closer to where the CEO is. CEO and director of the product are really trying to drag an organization in one direction. They believe that the business should be functioning very differently or is functioning very differently. So this creates a lot of conflict and dynamics, because if the CFO believes the business is very reserving in the left-hand side of this chart, and the CEO is really trying to drive the organization to invest, take a lot of risks, there's going to be some communication conflict. So what we do with this is show everyone where they believe the business functions, and then really get some alignment around how they should be making decisions. So then you can settle on an organizational identity. So the identity may, at the end of the day, be a scientist. The CEO has a different perspectives on the business, how he approaches that, but then an expectation that the individuals on this side really have a reframing of how they approach the business. And a lot of nuance behind this. Don't have time to dig into a lot of that, but again, happy to sort of dig in a little bit further with you all. At the end of the presentation, we have a little QR code. You could scan it and take an assessment, and we'll give you the results and tell you how you specifically tend to see your business.
And to add, before he goes to this is a 1 to 2 minute assessment, 12 questions. And as James said, the thing I love about when we run this with folks, this is great to be able to see how everybody perceives it, but I get super jazzed when we use it as an aspirational tool. So everybody's answering it individually, but then we bring them all back together and we say, all right, now we want you to answer the 12 questions together, thinking about what the business needs to be competitive within the market. And the conversation that produces is unbelievable.
I was trying to pull up the right presentation on here that really talked about that side. Awesome. Change capacity. This is the, sorry, there's a lot on the screen right now. And we'll kind of explain this in brief. So we took the Big Five assessment, the ocean model, and really started to think about how we can apply the same framework and research, but again, from an organizational context, not how you perform yourself, but how you perceive the environment in which you operate. And when we ask the questions and really collect some additional information data, you get a high fidelity look at the behaviors. We also took into context the Net Promoter Score framework and research and said, let's look at how these behaviors have an impact, not on perception of our clients and Net Promoter Score, but our ability to influence the acceleration of the flywheel. So in a Net Promoter Score context, if it's a positive, you're more likely to have referrals into your organization through word of mouth. Negative, you're going to have more deterrence out there, so you're going to likely lose customers. In this context, when you see a positive Net Promoter Score, you're likely to be able to accelerate the flywheel based on the capacity of your organization to really drive, implement, and adapt to change. When you start seeing lower numbers, low single digits, and it gets into the negatives, these are friction points in the organization. So it really helps you highlight where an organization needs to focus. And you'll see the areas that we're looking at, this is comparable to the big five types, but the collaboration, horizon, integration, reliability, and proactivity. And let me actually get into that one in a bit more detail so you have a sort of a sense of what that looks like. Let's do full screen.
While he's bringing that up, I'll just kind of give you a little context of this one. This is a 20-minute assessment. It can be sent out to as little as, 4 team members to an infinite amount. We've had groups as big as Humana, as small as startups, utilizing this to measure the capacity of that organization's ability to sustain change. Whatever that change might be, you can use this in a DEI capacity and a change management capacity. This is going to allow individuals to understand whatever initiative is, as James keeps talking about the flywheel, what is our capacity to sustain that.
Right. And if you look at the different facets on here, we can really see across the organization where are the areas that the company, this particular company, really needs to focus on, and what are the facets of their behaviors that they could lean on when times get a little difficult. So for them, ability to clarify ambiguity, react appropriately, consistently create desired outcomes. So these are very tactical type initiatives, and you'll see integration and reliability very high. This happens somewhat at the cost of collaboration horizon. These are more strategic perspectives. And if you look below, there's some areas, daringness and boldness, hospitality to diverse perspectives, tendency towards predictability. So this gives the company an area or areas to actually focus on and work on. We also break it down by leadership type. So we want to understand, is this an area that the company is struggling across the board? Or are there certain departments, senior leadership struggling with a tendency to ask others for help? The other parts of the organization tend to be a little bit better at that. So you can have a more surgical approach to solving particular problems within an organization. So love the amount of information data, and we've applied this very successfully to DEI type initiatives and organizations because this provides you a different way to understand or look at kind of organization's perspective. The last part that we have, this sort of the bigger tool that we use, and this is the most comprehensive and the deepest dive. This assessment is about 4 hours. It's in person, and we do a facilitated session to really look at all 47 different principles that are inherent in every business, regardless of size, age, industry, that are critical for organizations to function with. And let me kind of dig into this as well, so you have a sense of what that may look like. So strategic, it's kicked out.
You'll have to talk to our CIO about the security of our system. It forces you out, James. So
I know, terrible. So if you look at the various areas, you get into implementation, marketing within marketing. You have brand identity, shaping the message, marketing plan, materials, digital marketing. So what this actually results in for our clients is an assessment that really looks at a variety of different areas. So you may have a strategic plan based on the outcomes of that says, hey, we actually want to do a, where's the good one on here? Driving sustainable profit. And based on that, it'll say, if you want to drive sustainable profit, based on the assessments, you have these 5 areas or 7 areas or 6 areas that you need to work on or prioritize. You can't work on 47 different things. You can't work on 30 things. So these help you identify the areas that you should really focus on. This actually creates a sort of a team chart, if you're familiar with EOS, an accountability chart that says, hey, here's the areas that we really should be focusing on, and here are the individuals that we have assigned to that particular area. With some these are standards, expectations or recommendations, understanding the importance of creating culture, and some tasks associated with that. You can go in and customize these based on how you approach your business and approach the strategic engagement. There's a lot that's behind the scenes. Again, we'd love to chat with you if you're interested in learning a little bit more about that side. But I know we wanted to leave a little bit of time for Q&A at the end. So we'll wrap it up a little bit, answer any questions. And if you're interested in taking the assessment, scan this at some point. We'll also send the presentation out, and we're happy to share the results and output and whatever documentation y'all are interested in out to you. Thomas?
Yeah, Rusty and James have a platform, but they don't do the change. They empower consultants to do the change. So it's a bento box, it's a closet organizer. It does not provide fashion sense. It doesn't get you dressed in the morning. So this is the kind of thing that I've taken this to one client and gotten some very interesting, very eye-opening results that dramatically changed how I addressed them and helped them see themselves in a new light. And I can't imagine engaging with a client on anything significant involving change management and not using this or something comparable, if I could find anything comparable. So the fact that these kinds of platforms are going to be proliferating in the years to come, in all, not just change management, but all the different areas in which we all consult, we need to be looking for platforms like this. We need to be looking for components like PQ, positive intelligence, and finding the ways to show up for our clients, amped up, juiced up, amplified, AI socket engaged, whatever the heck the future brings, to really accelerate our ability to deliver results for clients. And that's the takeaway for me from this presentation. And I'd love to get your questions, thoughts, and reactions. Chuck.
Yeah. What's your pricing model, Rusty, in working through consultants?
Great question. So we have a couple of different ways that consultants can utilize our platform. One is by subscribing to the platform and, kind of doing a monthly subscription, and we white label it to your platform. So as I mentioned, Charles, you were in the breakout room that we were in. A lot of our consultants kind of call this the EMR of the strategic industry. And for those of you that were not in our breakout room, we at New Orchard look at each of you as physicians of businesses. And so by subscribing to this, you would be able to configure it to build out kind of your methodology and, processes and procedures. So it's built to scale you. And just as Thomas said, it's empowering you as a data gathering. So the other way is we also have our data analyst services. So like, for instance, Thomas accessed us through that service and brought James in on a specific opportunity, had us conduct all of the data gathering, the write-up, and then presented that to Thomas to then for Thomas to turn around and present that in the way that he felt was appropriate. So the same way that a radiologist might read an X-ray and provide that to the doctor is very similar to the way that we're doing things. Yes, Charles.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a similar question to Bobbi. The very intimate kind of information implied by what you're talking about and how you're interacting. At what stage do you present this to a client? How do you make a sale with this?
Bobbi, you're muted.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Yeah, it can come in different times in the process. It does. I would say that the way that we've used it the most is near the beginning of it, to get people on the same page. It's a good time to introduce it then. I would say that even though it's in the early stages, I don't necessarily lead with it though, if that makes sense. Because I want to have some trust, because it's like you're talking about someone, they're saboteurs, and they have to know that they can trust you before they're going to kind of really open up. And that can come at different times. So does that kind of answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'll add, Chuck, that I've decided, because the PQ work was so powerful for me, I told all my current clients that if they want to work with me in 2023, they either are doing PQ work or they have done it. But I'm not going to work with anyone that isn't or hasn't, because I can't go back into the past and spend 80% of my time struggling and failing to help them overcome saboteurs when I've got a simple, reusable tool that gets me past that and on better things. Bill's been nodding a lot. Bill's always a very responsive audience member.
Yeah, well, you know, my question here would be actually for you, Thomas. How do you see weaving these two methodologies together to support a client in a very integrated way?
Right. One of the things that's going to happen when you start on organizational change, and hey, Fred, your department is kind of a train wreck, or hey, Barney, Bobby's laughing, these scores aren't maybe what you wanted, or you know, as we talk about reunifying the visions across the senior executives, you know, all I'm hearing from you is a bunch of negativity. Let's talk saboteurs, my friend. And because it takes a lot of courage to face big changes. And the more senior you are as an executive, I think we all know that the dysfunctions of most organizations spring out of the shadows and the blind spots of the senior executives. And I've yet to find anything other than this that lets me reach in there and start to have useful conversations. And for me, it's no guarantee. I'm not an expert at it. I'm not certified. Bobbi is, which is probably why I'd be leaning on Bobbi next time I need this deployed someplace. But you know, big picture, I'm looking at New Orchard, and then at the granular level of, you know, person by person, executive by executive, leader by leader. You know, whether it's the supervisor who can't challenge his own team, or the frontline manager who's just incredibly abrasive. Like, we need to talk. And I think the PQ work is a way to get them to confront their own issues and be more effective as human beings, and work well with others. Because I promise you, when you get into your SAGE, I literally have my SAGE powers written down on a card next to on my desk here. It's like, am I feeling empathy, curiosity, creativity, passion, and purpose in this moment? And if I'm not in my SAGE, and I'm not at my best. Okay, so do I need one or more of those 5 things right now? I do. Okay, give me 5 minutes, please. And I'll go like do some PQ reps and get into my SAGE. And I've yet to find any situation that isn't made better with one or more of those 5. Hope that answers your question, Bill. Bobbi, you wanted to add something?
I'm sorry, Thomas, what was that?
I just didn't know, Bobbi, if you look like you wanted to tag on and add something to that.
No, I'm trying to control my dog Moose. Sorry, he barged his way into the room. He's huge. You can probably see him behind me.
Thomas, I wouldn't mind adding
Great.
something to it. You know,
Yeah.
Bill, the thing that I've really enjoyed working with a number of consultants and kind of helping, they ask a lot of the same questions. How do I do this? How do I build this into my process and things along those lines? And what I love about each of our different clients is they're all thinking the same thing. I want to help. That's the very first thing. Like, I haven't met a consultant yet that isn't like, you know, that's not the thing that drives them. And so, you know, like with our tools, and I can even tell with Bobbi's, not every client needs every one of our tools, right? So, you know, even though we have BII and change capacity and OMI, and all 3 are called the business 3, all this, there are some times that someone just uses this, just uses an X-ray, just uses a blood test or something along those lines, because they've listened to something and they've heard, okay, let's dig into that and let's drill down. So, you know, how do these interact? What I love, and Thomas already said this, like New Orchard's on this, you know, on the, I can't remember exactly how you put it, Thomas, but, you know, more on the larger organization side of things. And then Bobbi's on the granular. And what I like about that is there are times that we have to start, like I've thought about this with some of our clients of I need to start granular just with that individual and see who I'm working with. And then, you know, kind of come out, come back in, come out, come back in. The thing that I love about capacity. So if I'm in your, I'll just because you shared on the breakout. So you work a lot with EMR implementation and things along those lines, right?
It's
that
part of, I work with clients who use EMR, so I don't necessarily implement for them, but yeah.
Okay, but there might be a change of some sort or a departmental change that's going on. And so let's imagine that you've utilized change capacity, you've surfaced, you can actually, and this is something that's really cool that James does, is we can narrow it in to that very small department of those individuals to see what is the capacity of these individuals. Once we understand that and we know that we need, maybe there's more out of this team, well, now you start looking at those individuals. Am I dealing with a judge, I'm not going to try to repeat them as if I know them, but basically what Bobbi was talking about. And so, and then raising that up. And what's really interesting is when you start reassessing over time, just as Bobbi was saying, we assessed this guy, he was at a 25, we're now at a 75. How did that impact change capacity as well? New Orchard's focus in the next 3 to 5 years is to be the front runners of predictive analytics regarding operational and behavioral changes.
So I got a question here for you. This is exciting because, you know, the beauty of a great EHR, and not many EHRs do this actually, where you can actually see the lab results progress in history over time, almost like a KPI dashboard.
Bingo.
So if we could integrate data, and this sounds like maybe what you're doing, like pull in the data from all the PQ employee surveys, pull in the Colby test, pull in all these things and actually see it. Now, Colby's test isn't going to change over history probably, but to be able to map that out and see things on the glance, is that basically what you're doing? You're kind of pulling in all these data points?
Yes. So there's a great, I think I told Thomas about this, but on Netflix, there's a 20-minute episode of History 101, and it's the making of, or the development of the GPS system. We are developing the GPS system of point in time, destination, and a pinging that lets us know how, and exactly what Bobbi's talking about is a huge component of that. That's like, where, we're going to have the mile markers. She's going to have even the more granular, what happened in between those mile markers. Is there the pothole in the road? But yes, that is the GPS system.
So here's the thing, there's only one EHR out there right now who does this that I know of. And it sounds very similar to what the blending that can be happening between these two systems. And that's where there's actually like a patient questionnaire that goes out on a regular rhythm. And it's basically like on a weekly basis, these patients will say, how are you doing today on a scale of 1 to 10? How overwhelmed do you feel? Or how much anxiety do you feel? Because what I'm seeing from the PQ test is that's probably going to vary depending on how much self-work you're doing at any given time, right? It's not permanent. Those results are probably not permanent. You probably get some momentum, right? Yep. But I think if you can preemptively catch like, hey, this department is really stressed right now, then that you might be able to preemptively solve some revenue, whatever problems that you might anticipate, right?
We actually had a conversation, and I'll shut up, I promise.
No, it's good.
We had one of our clients down in Alabama today, and we were talking exactly about this, of what are the ways that we can, I think it was work-life balance. Is that right, James? That was kind of centered around this. How do we determine earlier when someone's getting overloaded? Rather than reacting to them being overloaded. And that's exactly what we're talking about, behavior.
And I think, Bill, just to kind of add on to that a little bit, I'm a huge fan of both asynchronous data capture and data standardization. So if you have a sense of how you'd like to use the information, the decisions you're trying to make, and you capture information in the right way, you don't have to capture it all at the same time. For instance, one of the reasons why our change capacity assessment has been very effective in a DEI perspective is when you ask somebody in the beginning, what's your race, what's your age, what's your education level, your income, and then you ask questions, immediately people say this is a DEI survey and I'm not going to answer correctly, or I'm going to be skewed, or they're very tense. If you ask the questions from a perception perspective, how's the environment around you? And then in another setting, you ask or gather information around those topics, you can start to do much cleaner correlations between those two. Or you could say, hey, what's your behavioral profile, regardless of which one you use, as long as it's just captured in a way that these two are interoperable and you can harmonize the data, then you could start drawing much cleaner, more accurate correlations between those. And that part, like, we love the idea. We're not capturing, we don't have our own individual personality profile and a lot of these other elements, but we ensure that how we capture the data will work with other information that most companies are likely to have on hand.
So I want to
interrupt
sorry.
Q&A for just a minute and mention that we're at the end of our recording time. So I want to know if either Elizabeth or I would like to chime in with either a question or a comment, or anybody else, if you have something nice we can include in the recording of what's like the favorite thing that jumped out at you this past hour, the thing that struck you as intriguing or encouraging or delightful in some way. I think everyone knows what I like, so that's sort of worth it in my talking so far. I'd like to know from you, and we'll just go Bill, John, Diane, Chuck, and then Elizabeth and I, if you want to. What's the one thing more than anything else that stands out in your memory this last hour in a positive or encouraging way? Bill, you want to go first?
Sure. I
John,
mean,
Diane,
this, I'm just getting a really strong feeling that this is the future. And maybe I can go a little, there's one step deeper that I would love to explore here. Anyway, this
we have
this
another
feels
half
very
hour
resonant.
after I turn the cameras off.
Yeah, let's save this piece for that. So I'll pass the baton here.
We'll dive deep. Cool. John, then Diane, then Chuck. John, one thing.
I think that it's an excellent balance between the two methodologies, and using them in some kind of combination will bring out other options as well. But that this is a great starting point to really look between the different levels of a very big picture and a very narrow picture. And I think we should talk about the ConsultCon and introducing these ideas to many people in our organization.
Thank you, John. Diane, and then Chuck. One thing that sticks out in your memory from this past hour.
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing that I've heard is that the combination of data is taking into consideration the organization, and we all know that the organizations are made up of people, and if the people are not functioning well, then you get what you get. It's tough to change people, but if organizations are armed with the data that you have or that you are able to collect and show them that this is how it impacts their day-to-day output or their day-to-day operation, depending on who you're speaking to, that it provides a much more in-depth and much more emotional connection to the information. So people, I think, are quite tired of all the surveys. I mean, there's all sorts of surveys. There are some good ones. I mean, there are a lot of good ones, but it is all about the individual, and it's now the organization has to change the individual or tries to change the individual because of what the results reveal. So I think the overlay of the individual and the organization is imperative, and you guys are you've nailed it.
Thank you, Diane.
I'd
Chuck,
like to
final word.
I'd like to thank the three speakers for sharing so much. And certainly, Bobbi, I have read the book. I've, incorporated a lot of the material already since Tom told me about it in May, I think it was. And it's an approach that is fresh and that I can use seamlessly, just slipping it into a discussion with a client, no sweat. I've had some experience previously with the kind of services that James and Rusty are offering, and they're very powerful. There's no question about it. They've been around for a few decades, but if a client is ready, if they're willing to invest the time and money for this level of very intense analysis, I'm comfortable selling it. So, I really want to find out more about what you're doing. It's really great, and I want to thank everybody for the discussion today. It's really been good.
Super. On that note, I want to end our recording, and we'll switch into our final half hour of unrecorded conversation. And for now, thank you to Bobbi Kahler, James, Rusty, and all the attendees for being here today. I'm Thomas Cox, your MC. Thank you all very much. We'll see you again next month.